Hi, I'm Tom Haney, and in this presentation I'm going to try to give you information that may help you to stay fit and healthy and avoid injury. Now before we get underway, I'd like to tell you that for credit from the LMHF Wellness Program Part 2, you must watch the video in its entirety, watch to the end, and then make a comment on each video with your name. Once confirmed by LMHF that you have watched the video in its entirety, your comments and name will be promptly removed. Thank you and enjoy. The subject of this presentation is protecting yourself from workplace violence. It seemed like not that many years ago it was hardly an issue we ever thought about or talked about. Now it's an issue that has a growing level of concern for many of us, and we'll see if we can give you some hints as to what to do to avoid it. First of all, a little definition. Workplace violence is any physical assault, threatening behavior, or verbal abuse occurring at the work setting. Now that's pretty broad, from physical assault to verbal abuse, but the fact is, under the law, those are all considered workplace violence. And when it talks about your work setting, that's wherever you are if you're punched in and on the job. Doesn't make any difference if you're in a home office, if you're on the road. If it happens to you while you're punched in and on the job, it is workplace violence. Workplace violence actually comes in 4 separate defined types. Type 1 is violence by criminals who enter the workplace with having no other relationship to that workplace other than to commit a crime, oftentimes theft. That's pretty typical if that's what would happen. Type 2 is violence perpetrated on an employee by someone for whom you're providing a service. Someone you're doing a job for, and they, for whatever reason, lack of service, unhappy with something, they suddenly become violent in some way. Type 3 is violence against co-workers by former or present employees, and that is the one that kind of triggered our thinking in this regard, when we had somebody walk onto the work site angry at whatever for some reason and begin to cause harm to other people. That kind of is one lots of us think about in workplace violence, but it's only one of the 3 types. And type 4 is violence committed at the work site by someone who has no direct relationship to the work site, but has a relationship with somebody who works there. Often this is part of the scenario of a abusive relationship or spousal abuse, where they get followed to the workplace and become violent against the person that they were looking for, or other people who try to intercede. Those are the 4 types, and each of them has different approaches to try to mitigate the risk. For type 1, that's when somebody comes on site to commit a crime. It accounts for about 80% of the homicides that happen as a result of workplace violence. As I say, it's usually theft, but not always, and oftentimes the perpetrators are armed, which just raises the risk of injury or death for anyone attempting to step in. Certain occupations certainly have a greater risk than others. For example, taxi drivers. You know, if you're alone in a car with a stranger, you don't know if they're armed. You simply, it's funny, in a place like New York City where they simply go up and down the avenues and the streets, it's pretty straightforward. But here we pretty much go wherever they ask us to go. Well, that's a problem because they could certainly lead you into a dangerous area or an area with no easy way of getting help. The point is, that's a concern for sure. Working late night or gas station and convenience stores, that's a problem because often there's very few people there. Nighttime seems to be a time when lots of violence and crimes occur. So if you're on duty at night, that's always a concern for us and needs to be special precautions taken. And if you work in an area or have to travel to an area that is difficult for anyone to help you or to give you the emergency support you might need, that could be a concern for sure. And if you carry cash or appear to carry cash, that's a problem, because if people assume you have money, it is a valuable and a desirable, and they may easily attempt to take it from you, and that could perpetrate some sort of a crime that would result in violence. So what are the strategies for avoiding type 1? Well, the first thing is security. The more separation we have between you and the potential perpetrator, plexiglass and bulletproof protection is a concern. Distance, so that if you're having to work face-to-face with somebody, that there's a wide enough desk or a platform or table between you so they can't easily reach across to cause some harm. But those security measures are probably what's accounting for much of the concern. Special employer policies, and this would have to do with making sure that people are being checked on if they're alone or in unsupervised areas, having simple methods of reporting incidents, a whole series of policies that I'm sure are in place in most work environments. And of course the training. You should be trained as to what to do and how to protect yourself should something occur. And of course, one of the biggest reasons for the decline in workplace violence of type 1 is the fact that there's more security in work sites. If somebody enters your work site and you don't know why they're there or what their purpose is, ask them. You don't want strangers in your work site. This is where you work. It should be protected from outside influences or people looking to cause problems or commit a crime. Type 2. This is the kind of violence perpetrated on an employee by a customer, a client, a patient. You're doing your job. You're performing a service, and it could be anything from working in the medical field to working on a highway. The reality is that you interact with the public, and the public is everybody. And some are strange, some are psychotic, some are just unfriendly. I mean, you have to work with you have to be in a surrounding of a lot of people about whom you know nothing. And if they become irritated or aggravated or angry at you for some reason, it could result in violence being perpetrated against you. Certainly there are jobs where this becomes a more common issue. Law enforcement, security guards. Healthcare workers is a very big deal because in many cases healthcare workers have to deal with people who are having psychotic episodes. Well, an ER doctor or nurse is a good example. People that come in, they don't know them from Adam. They don't know what their circumstances are. They may not want to be there. Maybe because they're afraid of being turned into the police. Maybe who knows what. But they often act out. Maybe they're just in pain. Maybe anything except that they often lash out at the people who are simply trying to take care of them and keep them from exacerbating their injuries or dying. So they often experience a lot of violence in the workplace because of the nature of the work that they do. So being sensitive to the kind of work you do and the people you are surrounding yourself with makes a difference. Type 3 has to do with violence by past or present employees. Again, this is one that I think probably came highest to most of our minds back in the day when we actually created the term going postal, that there was several examples of postal workers who for no apparent reason came into work and caused harm or death to a lot of co-workers, many of whom they didn't even know. We realized then that there is that ongoing and potential risk in all circumstances. For whatever reason, people could be having problems at home, problems at work, psychotic episodes, they simply got laid off or fired or threatened. All of those things are possible, and many, many more that could trigger somebody to act out in a violent way. So what do you do to try to prevent that? Well, a lot of it has to do with the interaction with other people in your work site. We want your work site to be a comfortable environment for people to, I don't mean soft, I mean comfortable, that people are interacting with each other in a way that allows them to be treated with respect. So here's a couple of quick questions. Who do you think you are? Well, I would define myself, I don't know, I'm a pretty good guy, I care for other people, I'm try to act nice around people. But the real question is, how do other people see you? Because remember, they can't see into your head or your heart. They can only judge you on the basis of what they see. And what they see is how you act with them and other people. So how do you act out? So for example, how do you relate to others may make a difference in whether or not you maintain comfortable, and respectful interactions. Remembering that people are complicated. There are some things about people that you can readily be aware of. Things that are pretty straightforward, like age and race and color and gender. But how about all the other things that are important to them and make them who they are? I'll give you this little list here, some of them. These are the kinds of things that won't be as easy for you to identify right away, but you got to be very careful of how you interact with other people because of the sensitivities they have around things that make them who they are. These are important to them, and you have to be sensitive to those issues. So are you respectful of other people? Are you tolerant and accepting of differences? We live in a very diverse country, in a very diverse city and surroundings, and that's good. That's not a negative, that's a positive. The reality is, are you tolerant of all of those differences? Are you aware of them? Are you sensitive to them? And realize that each of these are people with most of the same issues you have. They want to put a roof over their head. They want to be able to feed their families. They want to feel safe. They're basic human needs and wants and desires. So are you sensitive about those kinds of things? Do you use good manners? Do you simply communicate with people using good manners instead of bad language all the time? Just simply speaking to people with a certain level of respect. Are you considerate of the feelings of other people, realizing how easy it is to offend people? Are you sensitive to that? And are you respectful about that? Do you deal peacefully with anger and insults and disagreements? It's not that we don't want you necessarily to react in a negative manner when you're treated unfairly or with disrespect. It's that we want you to be able to control your own emotions. Even if that person can't, that doesn't affect you. You need to control your emotions, and you need to mimic the mannerisms and kind of respect that you would like. Act that out. Act like an adult. You know, 2-year-olds throw tantrums and do all kinds of dumb things. But you're not a 2-year-old. You're an adult who can control their emotions if they simply decide that that's how they're going to interact with other people. They stay peaceful and calm. And don't ever threaten to hit or hurt anyone or yourself. Don't ever threaten that. That is, first of all, against the law. It is a threatening behavior that's not fair. It puts you at risk, and it puts other people at risk. They don't know how likely you are to act it out. Are you careful about what you say and do? For example, you have to be accountable for the words and actions you take. If you say something or act out in a certain way, there may be consequences. And sometimes the consequences can be serious. I mean, people have been fired and laid off and suspended for the way they interact with other people. Don't go there. Don't put yourself in that situation. Think. Use your head. Think about the consequences and think about what is it you're trying to accomplish, and is this going to be an easy way to do that? Think before you act. Using self-control, of course. Self-discipline, that shouldn't be an issue. You are adults, you know what it is to be self-disciplined. You know that you don't have to act out on every thought or feeling you have. And of course, setting good examples. Be the person you want others to be. Be fair to other people, open-minded. Listen to other people. They have a point of view. You may not agree with it, but listening is just a positive way of getting people to feel respected, and it helps in terms of how they feel about how they're treated at the job site. Don't take advantage of others. Just because somebody is a nice person doesn't mean you have the ability to take advantage, make them do all the dirty work, the hard work, the work nobody else wants to do. And don't blame others carelessly. It's easy to place blame, and that doesn't really help. Usually it's an opportunity for a learning experience. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? How can we prevent it from happening again in the future? And treat all people fairly, of course. Express gratitude. Tell people thank you when they work above and beyond. Do something special, let them know. And don't be afraid sometimes to let them know in front of other people. I don't know, if you do something really exceptional, I'm going to notice it. Forgive others. People make mistakes. We all do. I know I've made many. Forgive people for their mistakes. Use it again as a learning experience and say, you know what, we're going to work together so that this doesn't happen again. I'm not going to hold it against you as long as we can move forward on this. Help people in need. If somebody really is struggling, maybe you can be there for them and help them out. Be compassionate when somebody is really struggling. Don't be afraid to be compassionate. Be that shoulder they might need to cry on or lean on. Now, in terms of dealing with others, there are 10 protected categories in this country that are protected by law against harassment and discrimination, and these are the 10. Race, color, religion, national origin, age, sex, or sexual orientation, familial status, disability status, veteran status, and genetic information. Those are protected areas, and you have to be aware that if you were to digress in terms of any of those, you put yourself at great risk and at peril because they are protected by law. So being civil to each other is a big part of reducing the tension that may exist in a work site that may drive somebody to act out. So the idea is that being civil is about character. It's about respect, respecting yourself, respecting other people, and treating them that way respectfully. Don't apply the golden rule. What does that mean? Well, you all know. If you treat others the way you would like to be treated, it certainly makes the whole atmosphere more respectful, calmer, and better. Okay, give you some basic ideas about at the work site, how do you keep things positive and keep people interacting respectfully. Interact respectfully. What does that mean? Do you know what it means? It means eye contact when you're talking to somebody. It means undivided attention. You know, if I'm on my cell phone, I'm not giving you undivided attention. It's disrespectful. It means a tone of voice. It shouldn't be condescending. It shouldn't be sarcastic. It's two adults having a conversation. That's respectful interaction. Demonstrate a positive attitude. You may not be positive every minute of every day. There are those people who are, and they drive me crazy. No, the fact is that there are people who are always seem to be up and positive, and the reality is you should do your best to be positive when you can. When you walk onto the work environment, you should try to think, you know what, I have a job and lots of people don't. I am earning a living and a lot of people can't. I'm doing something that is fulfilling or rewarding or keeping food on the table. Think in those terms that this is something you can have a positive attitude about. Demonstrate accountability for your actions. If you do it, take responsibility or credit for it. Yeah, I did it. I'm sorry. Won't happen again. It was my mistake. That keeps everybody feeling good about each other. Work together with your team. Usually you have to work with other people, and its idea is if you have a common goal and you work together towards that goal, it will usually keep everybody motivated and feeling good about each other as long as you hold up your end. Have a questioning attitude. If you see something that's illegal, immoral, unfair, or unsafe, speak up. You don't live your life with blinders on. If you see something that needs attention, make sure it gets the attention necessary. Communicate clearly and directly. I always hate it when somebody tells me, well, I didn't know that. Nobody ever told me that. Then I realize in most cases that's not even true. They simply weren't listening. Or maybe the person who explained it to them didn't take the time to make sure that what they were saying was clear and understood. Think about this. What's most important when you're communicating with another person? What's said or what's heard and understood? Now, they may be equally important, but the fact is what's heard and understood really means that communication took place. You need to be sure that you are speaking and giving people clear, direct directions. And follow the rules. What does that mean? Well, when somebody is constantly breaking the rules, it undermines everybody's attitude. He gets away with it, how come I can't? Well, the idea is if everybody follows the rules, we will all be better off for doing that. Those are just some thoughts and suggestions for keeping peace and respect in the work environment. Now, type 4 is a little more complicated. This has to do with someone who has no direct relationship to the work environment except a relationship with somebody who works there. In that case, it partly has to do with keeping unauthorized people out of the workspace. It has to do with being sensitive to other people. If somebody is complaining that they're under being injured or under deep stress because of a personal relationship, get them the counseling they need. There are lots of places that will do counseling for free. Many of you may have an EAP. The idea is to get the help they need before it develops into something where violence may occur. And of course, when somebody tries to step in and be the good person, I'm not going to let you get in there, I'm going to take care of it. Well, then it puts you at risk as well. You got to be extremely cautious and careful about how you interact with other people. But if they're unauthorized and don't belong on your in your work area, then you can get the authorities, get security, and get them out of there before it becomes a serious issue. So some of the warning signs that might be interesting to look for in people, and this usually happens more in the HR environment, but if you have people that you work with who have an abnormal fascination with guns or weapons and access to them, I don't think that necessarily makes them a villain, or certainly not a criminal, but it means you want to be a little sensitive. This is somebody who could harm themselves fairly quickly. If they are an alcohol or drug abuser, they may have a tendency or maybe greater likelihood of acting out in a violent manner. Now understand, I got to make a quick comment here, and that is, all drugs aren't the same. People who smoke marijuana are not necessarily as likely to act out as somebody on amphetamines or some of the stimulant drugs that actually make people in some cases act out much more violently. And alcohol is a problem because of what it does. It lowers inhibitions. I mean, you certainly see a lot more fights outside of bars than you do in most other areas. Somebody who overreacts with anger, fly off the handle for relatively minor incidents, well, that's a person who doesn't have good emotional control. That's a concern for me. It sets up when people change in their behavior, a history of violence. Now, this is the most predictive. Again, I believe wholeheartedly in second chances. But the fact is, if somebody has exhibited violent behavior, it is more likely that they will do that again than somebody who's never had an experience of violence before. Be aware of that. Somebody who's an intimidator or a bully or an harasser, those are people that have a sense of superiority, and they don't like to take information or direction from anyone else because they're the biggest, the best, the whatever. Those are concerns. Those are people. Somebody who's always challenging authority, blaming others for their problems at work or at home. These are the kinds of things that you just try to be sensitive to. It doesn't make them into villains or criminals. It just means there is a behavioral evidence there of a greater likelihood of acting out in a violent way. Obsession or unwelcome romantic attention. Certainly that happens, that people get romantically attached to somebody who doesn't want to return that feeling at all. Well, and then they start to follow them around, maybe make inappropriate comments. The point is, that is a concern when you start seeing that. And if it's reported, it has to be acted on in an appropriate manner. If somebody makes threats to hurt themselves or others, that's a concern. There's no doubt. If somebody's publicly embarrassed or humiliated, we always worry about that because their response may easily be anger, and they want to get retribution or revenge on the person who embarrassed them. And then, of course, there are lots of things that can happen off-site. Somebody who's experiencing severe depression or because of some circumstance, they're lacking in sleep, they don't have friends, they're in chronic pain. These are things that can lead people to act out in ways that normally they would not. Your sensitivity to those, offering them help, trying to get them the help that they need is a big deal. Remember, our job isn't to make people into villains, it's to try to get them the help that they need to avoid them becoming engaged in some sort of illegal or unacceptable behavior. So who's at risk in a workplace? Everybody. Certainly some people are at greater risk than others, but we all need to be aware and sensitive to the fact that we work with other people who we may not know very well, and we don't know what's going on in their brains or in their homes. We need to be sensitive to all of that. So again, this is an old statement. If you see something or suspect something, say something. Go to the HR department, go to a supervisor and say, I think this person's struggling. I think there's a problem going on here. Try to say something so that some among us will have an opportunity to help this person. Stay safe, take care of yourself, and thank you very much for your attention.